Hello guys and welcome back. In today's video we're going to be playing some more For Honor, but we're not just going to be playing, we're going to be discussing a topic that me and my friends have been talking about for quite some time now. Now many of you will know that there is an upcoming DLC for the game which is free to all players by Ubisoft. Now there are 6 new heroes coming up in this DLC, but we cannot decide what's going on with them, who they are, which factions they're going to be in, and just so much that we need to discuss about it. And probably one of the most exciting is the guy in the center of the screenshot that you can see now. We cannot decide whether this guy is a Roman or a Chinese soldier, and I think we need to discuss this at length. Now, most of you are probably assuming that this is a Chinese man. Maybe you think it's a Roman, but most people that I've spoken to assumed that it is Chinese because it goes along with the theme of the game. I mean, you've got samurai, knights, and Vikings, and it would fit fairly well. I mean, a Roman wouldn't really fit into either of those 3 factions. Or could it? I mean, by history, it wouldn't make any sense. The Romans shouldn't really be associated with knights at all. But we've seen from this game that Ubisoft haven't gone with complete historical realism. I mean, things like having horns on the Vikings' helmet, amongst many other things, kind of suggest that this game isn't going along the historical accuracy. Also, we do know it is a fantasy world where there's just a huge war between Vikings, samurai, and knights. So, for all we know, the Romans could be hauled up into the knights faction. Now, the reason I say knights and not samurai or Viking is because I wouldn't associate the Romans with the Vikings at all. I cannot see them joining with anyone like that. I mean, that's not what the Romans were. And I can't really see them joining with the samurai because, again, that's completely different cultures. I mean, the knight is still unlikely, but it's probably the most likely out of the 3. Another option that we discussed lightly was that it could be a new faction, a Roman faction, but that would be extremely unlikely considering there would be only 1 hero in it, because we're only getting 6 new heroes. And also, that would just mess up the whole faction war and just the kind of basis of the game as we know it. For all we know, a new faction could come in later on, but for this DLC, I find it very, very unlikely and pretty much impossible. Deciphering whether or not this is a Roman or a samurai took us quite a long time. Now, the screenshot on screen shows you a picture of a Chinese helmet worn by some of the soldiers of the time, and it does look very similar in this first screenshot. But then we found another screenshot that was more detailed, and it did show that the character did have a Sparta, which is a Roman weapon. Also, you can see the armor is very Roman-like, and apparently, I'm not sure if this is a thing, but there's a color-corrected screenshot where the armor is very gold-like, and this possibly could be recognized as a Roman armor style shown on screen now. Building on the fact that we think it is a Roman would be because of the helmet yet again. We found some more images, or rather, my friend Cami found some more images, and he basically said that this is very similar to the auxiliary helmets found in Rome. I'll show a screenshot of these on screen now. You can see that it has the iconic kind of knob on the top of his helmet, which is the same in both the Chinese helmet that I showed you earlier and the auxiliary helmet that you can see on screen now, which is probably the thing that threw us off most because I researched some Chinese helmets and did find the image and thought, well, this is probably it. It fits in with the faction lore. And then we found the auxiliary helmet, which could suggest otherwise. This goes along with the Sparta and the armor, implying that this guy is a Roman. And it also helps that we have heard, I haven't actually got evidence of the color-corrected golden armor, which again would represent possibly a Roman. Again, I cannot be 100% sure, but this is something really, really exciting to actually have a Roman in-game and a Roman auxiliary at that. Another problem rose with this theory, and we looked again at the detailed screenshot, and you can see on the far left, it looks like the Conqueror with the shield and the flail, or the Morning Star, whichever name you want to go with. And then we have on the second in from the right, we have a Vanguard-like figure. Now, this could be the original characters, and it could be kind of like a tricking screenshot. They could be new, but they do look very, very similar. But if these were new characters that just looked very similar to the original ones, then that would mean there are 3 knight characters, and that would kind of upset the balance of adding 2 characters to each faction. That's only, of course, if they decide to add the Roman to the knights faction. That would basically mean there are 3 knights, 1 Viking, and 2 samurai, and that wouldn't really make much sense. I think they'd have to evenly distribute it between the factions. But I really can't decide on this one, guys. I'm going to have to leave it to you down in the comments. I think going along the basis of the original screenshot where it actually says 6 new heroes at the bottom is probably the most likely. I mean, on the other more detailed screenshot, it doesn't actually imply that these are the 6 new heroes, and they're kind of trying to trick us a little bit, maybe. Looking at the 2 figures in the bottom right and the bottom left, they appear to be kind of very shadowy, quite hard to make out until I went into the For Honor game and then saw it said something about the season pass. I quickly took a screenshot, and there's a more detailed picture of it here. We can actually see more clearly what these guys are, and this also implies that these are the new heroes. So we can see on the right, it's very hard to distinguish with that helmet, but I'm going to go with and say that that is some form of Saxon helmet, which is considered by me to be very similar to the Saxon helmet dug up at Sutton Hoo in Britain. Now, the helmet that I'm showing on screen now is the helmet that was found, and this is basically a helmet worn by royalty, so hopefully we'll see a Saxon that has probably got quite a lot of money to his name, and therefore can probably afford some very good looking armor, which will be nice to see in the game, whether that's just mail or maybe it's a different form of Saxon armor. Again, hard to say, judging by that shadowy figure. In terms of weapons, we do know that certain Saxons, such as the Huskarls, did actually use those big two-handed weapons, very similar to the Vikings. But again, we can't really tell whether they'll be using a shield and a one-handed sword, for example, until we see the hero upon the release of the DLC. We have to guess. Moving on, the figure on the left kind of looks like a Viking without a horned helmet. You can kind of see the nose guard very faintly. Well, I can see it on my screen. It might be a little bit grainy after YouTube, after the YouTube upload, but on my screen I can kind of see like the nose guard that many of the Viking helmets did have. And then from the second in on the right, we have a hooded figure. Now, this could either be a knight or a samurai. Judging by the armor, it looks very similar to a samurai. Again, it could be a knight. It's very, very hard to tell because the peacekeeper kind of has a not that much armor and a hooded figure, so it's quite hard to judge. The second in from the left looks very similar to the warden. Whether or not he'll be very similar or how he'll play out is very similar, we don't know. Again, it's very obviously a knight. And that would make sense if those two were knights, because that would kind of fit in with the order of the screenshot. You have 2 Vikings on the outside, or a Saxon, and then you have 2 knights, and the second in from the left and the second in from the right. And then the front 2 should be samurai, but again, we disputed the Roman earlier. I'm not going to talk about the Roman. The last thing we're going to talk about is the ninja at the front. Now, we think it is a ninja, and I'm going to explain the reasons behind this. We can see the character does have those lines of material running from his head, kind of like a ribbon, kind of like flowing in the wind. Very similar to what we would expect stereotypically a ninja to wear on his head. I think that's safe to say that this is a ninja just by going by that kind of headgear. But then we can back it up even further by the weapon that he is using. Or should I say weapons, because he does have 2 of them, 1 in each hand. Now, the weapons he's actually using without prior knowledge would probably assume that he's using some form of military sickle. However, he is actually using the Chinese Kama. Now, that's how you pronounce it. I've done a little bit of research on the pronunciation. These weapons seem to have 2 forms. There's one version that has a weighted chain attached to the top of the blade. Now, I presume this can be used to basically wrap around the enemy and then pull them to the floor, which would make a very cool guard break in For Honor. But in real life, I think it's just used to basically disable the enemy, pulling them to the ground, or kind of disabling one of their weapon arms. Upon doing a little bit more research, it does appear that the weighted chain is to basically wrap around the enemy's weapon, getting them entangled in it, basically immobilizing them, and then it basically allows you to charge forward with your Karma and basically smash them around the head with the blade and effectively kill them. Personally, I would really like to play as this character, especially if it's really quick. I mean, you'd be able to take on some of the larger characters, hopefully being able to wrap your weighted chain around their weapon, entangling them, and then rushing forward as maybe a guard break or some form of unblockable attack, which would actually make sense because they're not going to be able to block something if their weapon is entangled in your weighted chain. The ninja may not even have the weighted chain as part of its class. It may just have the Karma without these chains, which could still be quite fun, but I'd love to see it. Being able to entangle your enemy. I'd love to do that. Anyway, guys, I think that will wrap it up for this video. Make sure to go down in the comment section and basically discuss who you think these 6 characters will be. Maybe that's conflicting with my points or agreeing with them or coming up with something completely different. Also, make sure to go down in the description where you can find the link to my Discord where we can discuss this matter at a reasonable length, and I'm more likely to reply on there than I am down in the YouTube comments because in the comment section there's just a lot of you guys and I cannot always respond. You can also find my Twitter and pretty much all of my links to Steam groups, etc. down there. And I think that will wrap it up for this video. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Make sure to click that like button if you did enjoy, as well as hitting subscribe if you're new. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely brilliant day, and I will see you in the next one. I thought I'd give you a couple of stabs, you know? Just a bit of pinpricks.
That really fucking hurt. No!
Poke!
Yes! No honor.
Look, just execute him. Execute.